Are we? I don't. Are we? Yeah, toot, toot, baby. It's time to ride the funk train. What?
It's your schedule.
No, it's going live, babe.
Oh.
We first time ever doing a podcast, sweetie?
Yeah, it is actually. It's my first time.
It's fun. Well, welcome
Thanks for having
to
me on today.
Yeah, it's great. You're on today because you've never seen technology. You don't know how anything works. So you're Amish or what is it? Anyway, thank you for watching the Big and Funky Productions podcast. Tonight it will be Funkmaster V, Vinnie Vineyard, and the lovely La Femme Funk, Amber Schultz from Detroit, Michigan, as we talk about a little bit big and funky and what's been going on and how big of a week this has been and how big of a month this has been and how big of a year this is going to be. We'll talk about that a little bit. Got some good news that we'll talk about. And then a few minutes into the broadcast, we're going to talk to Jackey Neyman Jones. And you may be sitting there going, who in the funkity funk is Jackey Neyman Jones? Well, she's the last surviving crew member and cast member of the infamous B movie Manos Hands of Fate. So she was, if you know anything about that movie, you probably watched the Mystery Science Theater version. She is the little bride. No spoiler alerts, I guess. She's the daughter of the hapless family. I like them on Tubi, how they say it's a hapless family, because it is probably it's amazing that they even had a kid and a car and a dog at that point. They made so many stupid decisions in the first 15 minutes of the movie. It's amazing they could figure out how to pay their electric bill every month. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're going to talk to Jackey, and you got this interview, right? It wasn't Tracy, it was you. And what's weird is I've been trying to, there's a lot of like C list or D list or F list, whatever you would put her in, level actors and other interesting people that aren't really people you talk about every day, but they are people that are known and have done something interesting, like this lady being associated with what's regarded as one of the worst movies of all time. But it's one of those that's so bad. It's beloved. And I've always wanted to talk to her. And you got the interview, and we never even talked about her before. So why did you go after this lady?
So whenever I started hustling around in different podcast groups, I got in contact with a guy who links people up to potential guests, or that we could be potential guests on their show. And he was like, hey, so since you guys do movies, I have contact with Jackey Neyman Jones from Manos Hands of Fate. Would you like to have her on the show? And I'm like, yeah.
Because you've watched the movie.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're a big Mystery Science Theater fan.
Yes.
And, Danimal's going to be. Well, this is weird. What are you doing?
Look, it's been a minute. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump on for a minute, say how you doing,
Well, man, it's good to see you. We got Jackey Neyman Jones on tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Danimal. If you don't know who Danimal is, he's a local pro wrestler. He's also an auto mechanic, which blew me away that he's a good auto mechanic. And I actually have to talk to you about a couple things later this week. Real life situations that aren't fun. But anyway, he's also part of the Big and Funky family now, Danimal is. And played a part in what's up, Lisa Peters in the chat? Played a part in WJHC as a pastor who was a snake handler. And it's been a while since you've been on, and maybe the last time you've been on, I wasn't even on the show because I've been missing some podcasts. We all take turns missing. But what do you remember about the night that you were that we shot you? It's been almost 7 or 8 months ago, 6, 7 months ago, maybe more than that. But what do you remember the night that you were a snake handling pastor in La Follette, Tennessee, and got bitten by a coral snake? What are some of your fond memories of that jive?
Oh man, it was just fun. Like it didn't seem tedious or like is this a PG show? Like, can we
Sure.
say a pain in the ass?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like a pain in the ass. Like, oh god, I got to do this. It was cool, laid back, just kind of fun.
Now, a lot of people that do work with us say we're the most laid back movie production, but waiting around to do your part and stuff always sucks. But we try to make it a party atmosphere, and I hope you felt that. But the part of the movie is the coral snake bites you in the tongue, which I think is apropos. I think is all coral snakes should bite snake handling preachers' tongue. But for some reason, I had this crazy idea to have an effect where your tongue became swollen and became very large, like something to do with the Y2K, like it was almost like a curse or something. And I went and bought a giant lingua. For anybody that knows Spanish, I bought 2 of them. And how was it having raw beef tongue that was in the back of a cooler for 12 hours?
My internet keeps locking up.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. You look like Bam Bam Bigelow tonight, too. But, yeah, so he had I don't know what's going on with him. We'll get him back when he comes back. But he had to put that damn beef tongue in his mouth, and it fell on the tarp. And he was going to keep it and cook it. And I was like, that carp came from Demetria, the drag queen's basement. And let me tell you, Demetria is fabulous and everything, but her basement where she shoots her TikTok show is nasty. And so do you remember you're going to keep the tongue to fry it up later? And finally it drops so many times, you're just like, nah, I'm not going to eat it now.
It's actually hanging over here on my wall. I kept it just for a memento.
No, it's not.
No, I'm kidding. No,
okay, Jesus. I was like, meat turns, honey. I think we threw it. I think that was a night I wrapped all the tongue, all the blood, and the tarp, and I put it outside of WLAF, and like giant, almost like mutant-like cockroaches infected the tarp.
Sounds like La Follette.
Yeah, it was a crazy night. Those nights shooting up there were nuts. I can't believe it's been 6-7 months ago, but time flies when you make a movie. It takes a long time to get it finalized. But
are y'all discussing the next project yet?
We're not going to talk about too much. The problem with Camp Smokey and promoting it is you can't talk about it because everything about it is a mystery. You're going to have a prominent part. WJHC AM had over 100 actors, if you can believe it. And Camp Smokey, if you don't count the extras we're going to have, Camp Smokey's only going to have about 7 to 10 actors with speaking parts. It's going to be a smaller cast than The Hike. It's going to be a big feature for Luke, who's going to be the main character in this. But you have a prominent part, and it's a part you can't really talk about. And it's a part that a lot of people wouldn't do. And
I was just kind of curious where we're going to be at. Like, if you found us a spot, or
yeah,
we're just going to drive around and have fun.
No, we're gonna have to actually shoot. There's a great camp in Kodak that looks like a frickin' Jason. It looks like a Friday the 13th movie. There's giant pyres. It'd be great if we could set them on fire. It's an abandoned looking camp. The sign is falling down. It's a Michael Fox shouted out there to you, Dan. I don't know if you know who the Sledge is.
I know the Sledge.
You know Sledge. What's funny? This is weird. You're offering to help take down my sign at my on the mothership when we move, and Sledge was the guy that helped me put it up. A little behind the scene knowledge there. So
Sledge was there for the Danimal Travis Sawyer encounter that took the local wrestling world by storm.
What's weird is I was there that night that you and Travis wrestled. I was thinking about Travis the other day and how great of a wrestler he was, and how there wasn't too many guys like Travis who looked in the face
Stupid.
like, well, there he goes again. But Travis looked like in the face that he would kill you. And he legitimately, he was built like he was a badass, and he was a great wrestler, and he was a good talker, but he could also, there you go, baby. But I was telling him how Travis looked mean as shit, but actually was very funny in the ring too. Like there could be a lot of comedy.
There was it, yeah, and that's the thing. Even when he looked mad, being in the ring with him, you got to cover up sometimes because that's just the way Travis is. I mean,
well, he used to have the manager Tony Lacasio, and Lacasio was kind of like his comic relief and almost was like his comedic foil to Travis. Like Tony would cost him sometimes the matches and stuff. So
I love Uncle Tony. He's a fun fellow to be around.
Yeah, did you know that I was his wedding officiant?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Small world. But hey, what's Sledge saying here? He looked mad. Yeah, Travis looked mad all the time. We did an angle where he said he was the strongest man in TXW, and he had an arm wrestling competition with the Rip, and that was great because Rip was really jacked. That's why his name was Rip. And he kind of in the arm wrestling competition, he like put him to the table, and Travis was really giving that way. If it was good for business, he would give, but he was still, Buzz Sawyer's son. Buzz Sawyer was a hell of a wrestler, one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time, and you could tell he got something from his old man. But tell me about that match you had with Travis at Severe Attitude Wrestling that day. That was one of the best matches I've ever seen you have, and one of the best matches I've ever seen Travis have.
I'm gonna tell you what. That was the night Luke called me the equivalent of I was what he imagined Blue Fart would look like.
Why are you friends? Why are you friends with us?
Because I'm weird like that. That's just how that works. But yeah, I mean, I don't like. Sometime during the middle of the match, he said something, and I didn't hear it, and he caught me in the face with a running knee.
Ooh.
And that's all I remember. And everybody's like, "Oh my God, he's dead." And it's like, that's just not me. So we got up and went for another 5 or 6 minutes, and it was a standing ovation that night. It really was one of the best matches I've ever had.
Did he catch you in that DDT through the ropes, where you were like draped over the ropes? He caught you in a DDT.
So.
And then I know he did a superplex with you.
Yeah, he gave me the snapmare, and when he's giving me the snapmare, he said, "Watch the knee," and I didn't hear him. And he come running back and clocked me right in the face. And then he did the Randy Orton thing where I started to come in the ring. He gives you the little. And Rip says he kicked me in the face, but I don't remember.
He just abused you.
He just abused me. That's okay. All right. I got the superplex. That was the first superplex that I had ever done. Anybody ever let me call? I was like, "Hey, why don't we do a superplex?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, let's do that."
That shook the entire city of Maryville, Tennessee. Well, Danimal, thanks for coming on. We're going to boot you, though, and I will talk to you later about helping me out. We got have you ever watched Manos, the Hands of Fate?
I have not.
Well, you suck, and get out of here. Love you, Danimal. But yes, so what we have is we have, like we said at the top of the show, we didn't even get into some of the crap we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about that next week with Camp Smokey and our other movies we're making. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the last surviving cast member of Manos, the Hands of Fate. And for any of my Spanish-speaking friends out there, yes, that means Hands of Fate. It's a movie from 1966. It's I don't know what you'd call it. What would you call that, Amber? It's a horror movie, but what kind of horror movie? Is it just a get out of the house trope?
Yeah, maybe like a little bit of a psychological thriller.
Psychological thriller. I've been wanting to talk to this lady for a long time, and she's here waiting, and I'm just sitting here just wasting time. I don't even know. I'm a little intimidated to talking to her. Jackey Neyman Jones. How are you?
You're cracking me up. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being on our weird show. And just a little bit about us. We're comedic, pro wrestling, paranormal investigating, horror comedy movie makers.
Nice. I'm
That's
just taking the camera right here. It's everything's backward, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's we're in Tennessee, so that's probably a lot of people say that when they come here.
Yeah. I'm a 5th generation Texan. They say that there too. So
well, that's what I was going to ask you first. I was going to ask you some questions. And again, this is Jackey Neyman Jones from Manos Hands of Fate. Neyman.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Gets it
what
right.
are you gonna do? I got to change all the information now. But sorry about that.
He's gonna fire me now. It's my fault.
It is your fault.
No, your accent is great, no matter how you say it.
All right, yeah, we'll blame it on the accent. I got this Baltimore, Knoxville jazz musician jive talk.
Yeah,
meth mouth hybrid accent. But I was going to ask you, what? So yeah, you are from Texas. I mean, one of the biggest things that stands out about Manos is that is an ugly ass place where this movie was shot. Was that in West Texas? What part of Texas was that shot?
That was just outside of El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
And only people that live in that area would have any idea. I think it was near Isleta. There was just an area that's probably really built up by now, but it was pretty open desert at that point. And a local Judge Coldwell, that was his property, and the columns and the master slab all came from the old El Paso County Courthouse. And when it was torn down, his father had that stuff moved to their backyard, basically. And somehow Hal Warren, who created the film, discovered that through friendship, and that was where we filmed.
Well, that is totally fascinating, because every time I just watched the movie very recently again. And I was just sitting there going, this is the ugliest place I've ever seen. And it took. Well, I mean,
rude,
the road to it. I mean, you know how it's pieced together.
Okay.
To make it look.
To her for years,
what?
And now you've been wanting to talk to her for years, and now you're.
Well, I'm me. I'm not going to I love her being on. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. The road.
You shouldn't. No.
The road to whatever this place was basically dirt. And I was like, you've got all these really nice cars in this movie, and I'm just sitting there thinking about the engine and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are riding around on sand the entire movie. I was worried about the bodies of these vehicles.
But no, that's where the vehicles grew up. I mean, that was their life. I mean, that's my stepfather. Years later, he collected old cars, and he restored old cars, and he ended up with like 25 of them, like, from the 30s and 40s, Packards. He had 3 Rolls Royces, and he restored them, and they all rode on those roads. So I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I'm ignorant. I'm an East Coast guy. I'm always asphalt and concrete's all I know. So what?
Rookie.
I think that's fascinating. Yeah, right. I feel like, now, is your stepfather the priest of Manos? Is that or is that your father?
No, that's my dad. Was the master.
Okay.
With the big robe, and he also did all the props. He was in charge of makeup and props, and I mean, these were all theater people. So. But my mother made the costumes, and the Doberman was our family dog, and most everything from the master's house came from our house. All the props. I mean, the quilt on the bed my great grandmother made. Honestly, it was truly a family film to me.
Right. And so you said Hal Lauren made the movie. Now, I read some interesting things about that guy. Is how did he, why did he want to make the movie, and how did he get around to it? Because he didn't have any experience in movie making before. So
Not in movie making, but he had been a stand-up comedian, and
really,
he was involved in local theater. I mean, the El Paso theater community was very strong and very tight in those days, in the 60s, at the Festival Theater. And my dad was, he played the lead in many roles through the Festival Theater. I mean, that particular year, 1966, my dad, the master, won Best Actor Award of the Year for playing the lead in Henry IV. And
oh,
I mean, he played King Arthur in Camelot. He was in I mean, just so many plays. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He played the lead. Just so many plays. And Hal Warren was very involved in the theater. And it was actually the play, Henry IV, where Hal Warren looked around and he saw everything he needed other than the women. But John Reynolds, who played Torgo, was in that play. My dad, Brian Jennings, who played the sheriff, was not only in the play, but he was a local lawyer. So he was another connection. Hal Warren was an amazing salesman. He sold cars. He sold insurance. He was just this marketing guy, and he saw this opportunity, and he looked around at the landscape and the constant comfortable weather. I mean, it gets hot in the summer, but it doesn't rain a lot. There was a lot of films actually filmed in that area over time. And Hal Warren saw this opportunity, so he knew he wasn't making a good film. He just thought it would bring interest to the Southwest, and he really thought this film was going to open doors so that he could be the guy that brought the film industry to the Southwest.
So that was his motivation for this.
Oh, yes.
And that didn't work out, did it?
Not quite. But in a different way, it did.
How so?
There were several films that had come to that area, but not because of him. But just the whole, the fan base of Manos, it's just weird. I'm just now learning after all these years what it is that makes Manos so captivating to
Tell
people.
me, because I don't know. It is.
Yeah, it's weird. I haven't understood it for many years. It's like 1993. The premiere was so humiliating.
In 66?
Yeah, it was awful.
And you remember do you remember shooting the movie, and you remember the premiere?
Oh yeah, I wrote a whole book about it. Where's my book?
Yeah, your book is called I wrote it down.
Growing Up with Manos the Hands of Fate. How I Was the Child Star, the worst movie ever made, and lived to tell the story.
Well,
so you know what? I have 4.5 stars on Amazon for my book. So I'd love to say that it's a really good book about a really bad movie.
Well, it is a flop. It's a terrible movie, but it's so bad that it's a good movie. It's hard. It's when you get to the point to where it's hard. It's a fine line, because there's a lot of bad movies that are unwatchable, and there's a lot of bad movies that that there are millions of dollars and famous actors and famous directors and famous producers and big budgets and big sets. And you're like, this is terrible. And there's something about, you could tell that it was probably a bunch of friends or family, and it was a passion project.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a lot of money, so you're almost rooting for the movie in a way.
Yes.
I think that's kind of part of it too. And I've got a lot of questions to ask you. I mean, I will get to your book in a minute because I want to talk about that. But talking about you being young, did the movie have an adverse effect on you since it was like you were acting in a horror movie, or were you great with that?
No, I was 6 years old and I turned 7 that summer in July. So I turned 7, I was about 7 at that time. And my dad was in theater. My dad, he was executive director of the local South El Paso, Texas Boys Club. And my mother was a teacher. But both of my parents were very creative, and we lived in a neighborhood where we were basically not only the only non-Hispanic family, but my parents were so different from everybody else around us.
I bet.
And so we were an oddity. But my dad being in theater, I just adored him so much. And every chance I got, I went to the theater. So I was a very observant child.
So you knew you were making make-believe, that nothing really was scary going on and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. I was just happy to be there.
Right.
And as a 6-year-old kid in the desert at night with no supervision because everybody else was busy focusing on other things, it gave me a lot of freedom, which, as that's just who I am. I enjoy that, and I wrote about that in my book. It's like a kid in the desert at night with all these nocturnal creatures like snakes and scorpions and all kinds of shit, and so I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I was very observant, so I held on to these memories. And then the premiere happened.
Tell me about that.
Oh God, that was a tough night.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
No. So Hal Warren was a salesman, as I said, and his whole intention was to bring the film industry to the Southwest. So he had a lot of connections. He, like the judge who loaned him his property to film on, for instance. Brian Jennings, who played the sheriff, was a local attorney. So he not only played the sheriff, but he was the attorney for the, you know what I mean? I mean,
right.
How knew how to make things work.
Right.
And so at the premiere on November 15th, 1966, he got a red carpet for the theater, and he invited everybody. I mean, all the city aldermen, everybody that was anybody was invited to that film. And he borrowed the lights from the local car dealership because he used to sell cars, I think maybe at the same dealership. But so we had the lights scanning the sky, making everybody in El Paso go, what's going on downtown,
Yeah.
And we were downtown was less than like a mile and a half from the border, from Juarez, Mexico, and the Rio Grande River. And El Paso had all these children that they sold chiclets, gum, and they washed windshields, and they did whatever they could to help their families on the river there in the Mexican barrio. And so how about all these little the little notepads that you write on and those little cheap pencils. And he hired the local kids, these little boys, and gave them the pencils and he made them the autograph seekers. So Hal rented one limousine and he had the whole cast and crew lie in the alleyway of the Cortez Hotel a block away. So we're all waiting in all these wonderful clothes. I mean, my mom and I spent hours in the beauty parlor that day. I mean, the women all had opera gloves, men all rented tuxedos, and we're all waiting in this dark alley for this limo that comes around the block. And it picks up a family group, and then drives around the block and deposits us at the red carpet and the lights. So it was quite the fancy affair. But even as a 7-year-old, I remember the limo dropping us off and all these people. And I just remember thinking, am I the only one that notices it's the same car and driver? So we all go into the theater, and I'm still excited because
I love that.
Nobody in the cast or crew had they hadn't seen the film.
Uh-oh.
It happened so quickly.
Yeah.
And Hal had said through the whole film, no problem, we'll fix it in the lab. Editing, it's magic.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he always said the lab. And, so
mad scientist will fix it.
Yeah, so anyway, during filming, even though nobody had done film, pretty much everybody knew that, and Hal never said it was going to be a good film. That wasn't his intention. His intention was just to bring interest to the Southwest.
Well,
it was the introduction, and so nobody had really seen it, and we all showed up with trepidation and expectation, but my dad made sure that I could see, so we sat like 5th row center, and there was no way to escape. I mean, what are you gonna do? The lead can't just get up and walk out,
This is a stinker. We're leaving.
Right?
Get the limo to come pick us up again.
No. So we got anyway. There's way more to the film, but I just have to say that the local entertainment writers in El Paso were big fans of my dad and big fans of the theater and the people that were involved. They were very supportive, and this was so humiliating that
oh my God,
they were so kind.
Oh,
they didn't write horrible things. I mean, the worst thing I think that was written was the next day an article came out. I think her name was Betty Burns, but she wrote that the hero was massaged to death. And she was talking about Torgo, being on the slab, being massaged to death. I mean, yeah, they were exceptionally kind. And
that was before the internet.
They didn't write anything at all. I mean, they just kept silent. It was so everybody left the theater hoping to never speak of it again.
Oh my God.
And so me as a child, it really was the best summer of my life. I got to hang out with my dad. I was the only kid on set. It was really amazing. And so I held on to those memories.
Well, hell yeah.
as I grew up, I started looking for the film, and this is way before the internet. And I was looking on, it was like the beginning days. And so I started looking at university libraries and trying to find a copy of it. And then in 1993, my dad calls me out of the blue and says, "You'll never believe what I just saw on television."
All right, let's stop right there. I have a couple questions. I want to get to that point because you're talking about Mystery Science Theater, I imagine, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple things, because you're really one of the last people that is an expert on this movie.
Pretty much.
That's not a fan. What did Manos? Was that something that Hal conjured up, or was that based on some sort of local legend or anything?
No, he made that up completely.
Okay.
But initially it was called, shoot.
Was he scared?
It went through several names.
Was he scared of hands? Was he scared of hands? Is that why you made it the bad guy a demon?
No. He had this whole idea about this film, but then when he cast my dad in the lead, he changed the name to Fingers of Fate. And then my dad suggested Manos, the Hands of Fate, kind of tongue in cheek, because we're in El Paso and Manos means hands.
Yeah.
But here's the ironic thing is our dog, Shanka, who is the Doberman, the master's demon beast, which wasn't a demon at all. He was a sweetheart.
You could tell.
And you can tell.
He was awesome.
He was a great dog.
Yeah.
And but his name was Shanka, and my family is of Osage Native heritage, Osage Native American, and Shanka basically means dog. So it's like Shanka, dog, Manos, hands, You
guys are very meta. You're very meta with your names. So let me ask you this too before we get to Mystery Science Theater. Just for the fans of the film, was Torgo a man, or was he a goat, or was he a monster, or a man goat, or what was the idea about making the thighs so thick?
That's a little confusing, because I think initially Hal had this idea of him being a satyr.
Okay.
But obviously, budget didn't include that, and we didn't have special effects in 1966. And Hal put my dad in charge of not only costumes and props and everything basically in the background. And so what John Reynolds, who played Torgo, what he wore was my dad's desert scavenging hat. Those were his welding coveralls. And then the legs were made of I remember I was in my dad's studio every chance I got. My dad did sculpture and clay and welding, just pretty much anything. And my mother was a great seamstress, so I learned from both of them. But my dad made he made Torgo's legs out of fencing wire and upholstery foam from like cars, car upholstery foam. So that was on the inside of the leg, and then fencing wire. So there's rumors saying that John Reynolds became addicted to drugs and committed suicide because of the pain of wearing this. And I'm telling you, this thing was shot in like 10 days. So there's no way you get addicted to acid and kill yourself in 10 days.
Well, at least at least there was upholstery. At least there was a little
There was
something in there. So.
It wasn't. So what I'm saying, it wasn't like horribly painful. It was just awkward.
Now I'm going to ask you this real quick. Did any of the one of the biggest scenes in the movie is the battle royale brawl between the women?
Why?
Yeah, did any of the women get hurt? Because a couple of them fell pretty effing hard there.
Yeah, so during rehearsals, which there were very few of, I mean, there really was no rehearsal time. The women had never even seen the script. They didn't even know what they were supposed to be doing until the moment the cameras were on. There was no rehearsal time for anybody. And but Bernie Rosenblum, who was one of the crew, and he was the kissing teenager in the car. And by the way, he was very proud of that car. It was a Triumph Spitfire, and
it was a badass car.
Yeah, he was very proud to show his car off. But the woman he was kissing, Joyce Moyer, was supposed to be one of the wives. And during one of the very few
remember this.
Practicing, working out that particular scene, she fell and broke her ankle. And I don't know this for sure, but these are just things that I've heard in my research that some of the other women were maybe a little jealous of her, or maybe because she was strutting herself a bit. I don't know, but she may have been pushed a little hard and she broke her ankle.
Man.
And so to keep her in the film, Hal wrote this extra scene, and also to extend it, to make it a feature film, because you remember the 8-minute opening driving scene.
Yeah.
That was pretty horrible. So, I mean, to make this a feature-length film, and so Joyce was in that car very uncomfortable with a cast on her leg.
Making out for 9 hours. The
At
restraint.
least. No, it was longer than that.
Well, it was very, very restrained in the 60s, how people just never went into heavy petting. They just necked for 6 hours.
My God. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't as fun as it looked.
I bet. So this thing never really got distributed. You had a premiere, and then you looked for it years later, couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And did anybody see this, or was it anywhere in the 60s, 70s, or 80s?
Yeah, and I'm finding out more and more about it. It was distributed briefly on television.
Wow.
A few people have seen it, but then it went on. It went into the drive-in theater market.
Okay.
And so it was like the second or third film of the night. And I think it was actually set up as the film to make people just go home, to drive away. God, you got to close the gates at some point, right?
Oh my God, you're hilarious. All right, so this thing is made, it's distributed, it makes maybe a little bit of money, but it really isn't.
It didn't make any money. I'm sure
okay.
It didn't make any money.
Okay, I was just trying to make somebody feel nice about something, but so It was a bomb. It was a bomb. It disappears. Your dad calls you. He sees it. He sees it on TV. Tell us about what happened to you and your father after that happened. How did life change for you guys, if at all?
That was pretty incredible because, so I'm in Northern California. My dad is on the coast in Western Oregon, Lincoln City, and he liked Mystery Science Theater. He used to watch it. And so one Saturday afternoon, he's sitting in his easy chair and he's watching Mystery Science Theater, and he's kind of like dozing off, and he hears this familiar music and opens his eyes, and there he is. He was shocked. So he watches it. He watches the whole thing. It was on Comedy Central. And then he calls me and he says, "You'll never believe what I just saw." And I'd been looking for it for so many years. And so I turned on the television because I remember we had Comedy Central and I knew they had an 800 number and I think it was the right-hand side lower screen. So I turned it on and I called that number. I didn't know what else to do. I just couldn't believe it. And this guy answered. I mean, this is like 1993. This would never happen today. An actual human answered the phone. And he identified himself as Matthew. And I said, "You just showed a movie that I've been looking for my whole life. My entire family has been involved in it. And you just showed it. And is there any way I can get a copy?" And he says, "Well, what was the name of it?" And I told him. And there's this long pause. And I didn't know if he'd hung up on me or we got disconnected. And I mean, I remember I was just like shaking. And
oh, wow.
And I didn't know if I could have the courage to call back, especially if he'd hung up, you know. And there's this long pause, and then he goes, "Oh my God, are you Debbie?"
Uh-oh.
It was just incredible. And I mean, I looked at the phone. What? And I asked him if he could send me a copy, and he said that's our favorite worst movie here in the HBO offices. And I just had it on my desk a couple days ago. And so he made me a bootleg VHS copy, and I still have it. He just
Sweet.
made a copy and sent it to me. And so I watched it by myself. I had a husband and a 3-year-old child, and I just watched it by myself, and I was happy. I felt like I'm vindicated. I'm happy. I've got everything I ever wanted. And then it just took off. It's just crazy.
Your signal's breaking up a little bit. I don't know if there's a better spot maybe for you in the house, but so you get to see the movie after, let me do the math here, 27 years. So you're in your 30s, I guess, right? And so you get to see the movie. And what does that do? Why was that such a big thing for you? What did that mean for you to see that finally?
Well, I've been looking for it my whole life. And to see it just brought back so many memories and solidified what I'd been holding on to know that my memories were accurate as far as I knew.
Well, that's really cool. Now, was the woman that played your mother, was that your mother in real life or no? Was that an actress?
No, Diane Marie, she's still alive. And,
Oh.
you know, I made a sequel film in 1916, Manos Returns, and my dad is in it. We brought the master back. Diane Marie, who played my mother, we brought her from Colorado, and she plays my mother again. And let's see, the only other person was Brian Jennings, who played the sheriff, was no longer living, but his son played the sheriff in our new film and has been very involved in many projects since then. So we kind of brought the family back together as best as we could, and we're still doing other projects together. But, you know, Diane Marie is actually only 12 years older than me. So that that's kind of creepy.
Well, we make our own movies with Big and Funky Productions, and I'm constantly cast with beautiful, out of my league young women, and I'm a creep. It's just because I'm actually pretty quick, and I could relate to the guy. I'm like, that guy was way too old for his wife in that movie.
Right?
It was just kind of a creepy thing. Like, what was that about? But anyway, so tell us about this sequel. I've never heard of it before today. I looked it up and found it today. But what is that about?
Yeah, we created Manos Returns, and I believe it was released in 2016. We did a Kickstarter, and I'm very proud of it. I play the lead, and it's the Manos cult 50 years later. So my dad plays in it as the master, but I am now the master. It's like 50 years later, and Debbie, the child bride, has become the master. But now there's these wives still, and they're just kind of annoying because I don't have any use for a bunch of wives bickering around me. We have Torgo, who Stephen Shields, I think he played it beautifully. I'm very proud of the project. We didn't create it like a parody. We created it as intentionally and with as much spirit and energy as the first one was done. And I think that's one of the things that makes Manos so beloved, is that it was created with the best of intentions. People worked their asses off. They gave so much to this film, and I think anybody that's in theater or film understands what it takes to. I mean, really, it's really incredible that these projects ever made it to the end, because how many movies just don't? People try so hard, they put everything, all their energy into it, but
And
it's
money.
not easy.
No, it's not easy making movies. It's not. It's very difficult, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done. So you're saying the sequel is earnest. It's not a parody of itself. It's not a wink and a nod. There's no breaking the fourth wall. It's made with as much passion for telling the story as the original was. That's pretty cool. And I think there's something to that about Manos, because Manos never pokes fun at itself, which it could have. I don't know if that was, yeah. The interesting thing about Manos too is and spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, the movie's been out for 50 years. Get over yourself. The bad guys win in Manos, Hands of Fate. And I think it's interesting. Tarantino has said the 50s were the worst period of time in Hollywood, and it went to 66, like Hollywood the 50s part 2. And even the good movies in the 50s, there's a lot of problems because it was so schmaltzy, and all the endings were like overblown happiness and sugary sweet. And it seems like Manos was almost part of the new Hollywood. 67 was that new Hollywood that went in the 70s, where everything was, the bad guys won, the anti-heroes started coming out, Easy Rider, The Hustler. There were movies about, and so it seems like it helped usher in that spirit of, sometimes when you go to the movies, the good guys don't always get the girl and run off into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, those were really interesting times. We were like right in the middle of the Vietnam War. We're in the women's movement. Yep. There was a lot going on. And I mean, my mother was a complete liberal. She was a teacher, and she was a great advocate of the women's movement. And my dad was an artist, and he was executive director of the South El Paso Boys Club at that time. So I mean, we lived within 3 miles of the Mexican border, and we lived in a neighborhood where we were the only family that wasn't Hispanic. And yeah, it was just really, really different times, and a lot of I don't know, just a lot of movement, a lot of openness and change, and
Well, it's time for a change too. At that
yeah,
point,
like it is now.
there's a lot of similarities. There's a definite.
Oh, I just reread my own book a few days ago because I realized I needed to renew my memories because I held on to those memories so tight. And then when I read my book, I could let go of them. I didn't have to hold them so much anymore. And reading my book, I'm just really noticing how similar we are in attitude in our times right now. It's very interesting.
Well, tell us about your book. We're about to run out of time here, but your book. What's the name of the book, and what is the book about?
It's called Growing Up with Manos, How I Was the Child Star of the Worst Movie Ever Made and Lived to Tell the Story. So Growing Up with Manos is what you look for on Amazon. I have my Etsy that is Jackey's Manos on Etsy, and Jackey with an EY. And so if you want an autographed copy, you can get it from my Etsy. But otherwise, you can get it from Amazon. It's on Kindle. But the book is really a backstory about the 60s and West Texas and everything that it took to make this film, the backstory of the film, and each of the characters and all the research that I did to find out who they were and what inspired the film.
And does it go into any of, and I wish we had more time to talk about this, but when Mystery Science Theater's episode of Manos hit, it was voted the #1 episode of Mystery Science Theater by the fans. The fans loved that episode. So what did that do to you? What did that do for you? Did it suck in any way? And what did it do for your dad?
So, well, I mean, you know, we could do a whole nother show on this part, but my dad and I had been estranged for many years. He was remarried. My dad had attempted suicide, and he was remarried to a woman who also attempted suicide. And they'd been married for like 40 years. And but somewhere in the middle of that, she decided that I wasn't welcome in the family. So when Manos took off, somehow it became something that was acceptable for my dad and I to get together on. Otherwise, it was like I would run into him at the store because we lived half a mile from each other for many years, but we weren't allowed to see each other. So Manos became, so that's what happened. It was like I just started coming up with ways to bring him into my life through Manos. And it just grew and grew and grew. And so it was wonderful going to conventions and talking to fans and letting them know that the master approved. And then he would live vicariously through me with these things. Funny. And he just loved it so much. He loved it. And so that's how Manos, honestly, that's probably how Manos Returns came to exist, was to get him into a project.
That's sweet. There's a couple projects. There's Hotel Torgo, which is a short. There's a couple things, but
and there's some new things coming up. I'm working on a documentary right now I'm also in a web series. We've already filmed the first episode, and we're looking for a distributor. It's called Manos. The Manos Chronicles, and we actually have a what do you call it when you? My mind.
I feel you, girl. I know what you're going through.
Oh my god! But we have something to show for
a concept, proof of concept.
Like when you not a premiere. What do you call it? My brain.
It's a proof of concept, a trailer.
A trailer.
Yeah,
we have a trailer.
All right.
For the Manos Chronicles.
I want to see that.
I'm so proud of it. I mean, this thing is good. It's gonna be really good. We're looking for a distributor, and we may have found one or two choices here.
That's the crappiest thing in 2021 and 2022 is trying to find a distributor. It's worth a damn. But good.
Yeah, I was just approached about doing a fundraiser for this documentary idea I have. So there's a lot of things coming. Manos is definitely done.
And this is the one thing, the original movie was what it was, and everybody knows what it was. But there are images and if you look for Manos Hands of Fate on Google and look at images, there's a lot of cool concept art, fan art. There's a lot of neat imagery about this movie. It resonates with a lot of people. And that's what, as an artist, is what you want. You want something that resonates, and it's got a life of its own. And we may be talking about Manos Hands of Fate for 100 years from now. And they're not going to talk about Short Circuit 2 100 years from now. They're not going to talk about Spider-Man 3 or whatever, but they are going to be talking about Manos Hands of Fate. You got to feel good about that.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, that's what the documentary is going to be about, is all the amazing, talented projects that have come out of this, like Manos Hands of Fate, Puppet Theater, a whole play. It's on YouTube. Look it up. Manos Hands of Fate. And then there's 2 stage productions, and one of them I was able to be part of in Portland, Oregon. I actually got to play my own voice. By the way, all the voices were dubbed in the original. All the women and the 6-year-old child were dubbed by one woman. It was horrifying at the premiere for me because nobody told me my voice was dubbed. And then 50-something years later, I get to be the voice of Debbie from the sound booth.
Finally.
In a stage production. I get to be the middle-aged woman going, you be a good puppy, or,
I could tell. It's funny. I've been doing movies long enough. The wind was blowing in the opening scene we guys pull off. And the mom and the dad are talking to each other. And I'm like, the lips aren't matching up great. And I see her hair blowing. And I'm like, they did ADR for all this.
No, I mean, it was all filmed with a Filmo 70. There was a crank wind-up camera that only shot 32 seconds. It was a Korea-Vietnam War camera. All the best imagery from the wars were from that camera. But it was shot silent, so everything had to be dubbed.
So that's a lot of work. Sound is the devil when you're making a movie. Jackey, thank you so much for being on. I've wanted to talk to you for years. I have a bunch more questions. Maybe in a couple years down the road, we can get back with you and talk about, hopefully you're a multimillionaire making Manos.
That would be nice.
On Disney Plus, there's a Manos. You'll see Marvel, Star Wars, Manos, maybe something like that will pop up.
I don't know if Disney would take us, but yeah, there's a lot more to come, and I would love to talk to you again because there's so much coming up.
Can't wait. Ladies and gentlemen,
it's a whole new world.
Thank you, Jackey. Jackey Jones. What a great guest. Thank you so much for being on. Well, I'm not going to talk too much over her, Amber, but what did you think of Jackey?
She was fantastic.
She was great. She must be out there in the middle of El Paso. Her signal sucks. Something you've got, but it was amazing talking to her. I don't know. That was, and you know, us being independent filmmakers, that gives us a lot of hope because, you know, when you're making something on the cheap, it's never going to be theatrically released, but you do want people to enjoy it and watch it. And hopefully some of the projects we have can have some sort of, I don't know if I want to be roasted by the guys from MST3K, but it would be cool to see that stuff living through the pipeline down the road. But that was so cool. And making movies was so different back then than it is now. Much harder. They had to ADR everything. What do you have to say before we head out tonight?
She was really funny. I was really happy that she was really chill about the movie. So,
well, she had a good attitude. She have to have a good sense of humor about it. But it is what it is. I mean, it's bad, but it's that kind of good bad, and that's what resonates. And there's something about, you could tell the people. Now, here's the thing. I didn't want to say this to Jackey because I didn't want to offend her. I didn't know her dad could act. You know, because the thing in him and Manos, he's so, you know, you could tell he could deliver a line like he's a radio guy or something. But I didn't know he could do Shakespeare. And it's good maybe for that to get out there, that guy was actually a kick-ass actor. He won awards as an actor instead of it. Because you never know. You don't know if it's a bunch of guys, the guy that finances the film is just his buddies. But that's good to hear. That just tells you that they didn't have a lot of time to prepare and how low budget it was. They shot that thing in 10 days, which is a little surprising. Like yeah, it sounds like us. So anyway, that was Jackey Jones from Manos Hands of Fate. She's got a bunch of projects out and a book. I'm probably going to buy the book, even though every time I try to read, I fall asleep because reading is for losers. I'm just kidding. I just wish it was
Audible. I bet it's on Audible.
Do you think so? Do you think? I mean, I almost asked her that, but I was like, I don't know if it will or won't be.
I'll have to look and see because I have to do Audible if not I fall asleep reading too.
Yeah, we're both dummies. What's funny is now everybody's tuning into the podcast. You missed Jackey Jones, goofballs, from Manos the Hands of Fate. Anyway, go back and rewatch it. It was an amazing interview. Her video sucked, but her audio was great. And a lot of insight on one of the most infamous movies in cinematic history, and how she took. And the thing that I took from that is that the movie repaired her relationship with her father.
Yeah.
You know, me and you both have issues with our dad. There's no movie in hell that's ever going to repair the relationships with my father and me. I don't know about you, but that was a sweet moment there too. And that almost feels like maybe there was a divine or the universe or God was like, it came back at the right time. Because the one thing you could tell is this woman loved her father, and it was a good thing that they got back in touch with each other before he passed, which he did pass a few years ago. So anyway, I don't know what to say. I'm just going to blather for another 35 minutes, but I guess I'm not.
I have to say one thing. I want a limo next premiere.
You know what's funny? She was telling that story. I remember reading that story that the limo, they would be in an alley and they was just going around the block. And even what's the great thing about her telling that story was that she was a 7-year-old and was like, this is chintzy. This is low budget. This is almost embarrassing. And what would you do in a movie that bad where you are the lead actor and your family's there and you cannot go?
Right. You're trapped in the middle row.
I can't imagine. That's the thing about making. That's the thing about making movies is when I've been on TV shows that have been terrible and stuff. You're just like, I just turn it off. That you couldn't turn it off at that point.
No.
You have to suck it up, eat your
You need
popcorn.
to walk out. You have to walk of shame.
Put a mask on. Get El Gordo Gringo's wrestling mask and put it on and get the hell out of it. Okay, guys, we got a lot of information about our new movie coming out, WJHC. If you haven't seen our theatrical trailer, it's awesome. It was done from Johnny Brandon Film Work out of Arkansas. They did the trailer for us, and it's unbelievable. And then also our new movie, our old movie, The Hike, is still on Amazon Prime. It's still getting awards this award season, so check that out. It's on Amazon. Make sure you look at the one that has the green background with the Native American chick on the cover. That's ours. And got some information about computer-generated movie this week. I'll share it next week. And also, we're designing what the bad guys look like in Camp Smokey. And I got to tell you, woo, it's the stuff nightmares are made of. These movies are going to be so fun. So check out our crap as we release it. And also check out Jackey Jones, her book, and all the Manos properties and web series and shorts. And she said there was a puppet show. It's awesome. So check all that stuff out. Amber, you got anything to say before we say goodnight?
No, you said it all for me. I'm excited.
Me too.
Good
Good times. Yay. All right. Have a good night, everybody.